Hello and welcome to Out Loud. I'm your host, Greg Thompson. Today on our season finale, we have Emily Joy. Emily is a poet, writer, and yoga teacher here in Nashville. She identifies as an embodied justice enthusiast, which she describes as helping others make peace with their bodies. With an extensive online following, Emily has founded the Church2 hashtag, addressing sexual abuse in church settings. She was raised in the fundamentalist evangelical church and identifies as gay with the gender pronouns she, her, hers. As our conversation unfolded, we discussed the fluidity of understanding her faith and sexuality and not sticking to one category over time, as well as the impact of purity culture on her and on abuse in church settings in general, and the healing that has come from telling her own story to her followers. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to say thank you to our Patreon supporters who have helped finance the production of this season. If you like what you hear, become a patron. At just $15 a month, you can get exclusive access to unedited episodes of shows just like this one. And now, let's hear from Emily Joy. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I think the question I want to start off with is just kind of getting a sense of what was your faith like growing up in your household, in your family?
Yeah. So I would say that I was raised as like a fundamentalist evangelical. My father was a Baptist youth pastor when I was born. And I was, oldest of 7, homeschooled, all that sort of thing. And later in my childhood, we ended up like participating in a lot of different types of Protestant faith communities because my dad kind of ended up like starting his own nonprofit where we traveled around quite a bit. And so we got a decent bit of influence from almost every denomination you could think of, from like Calvinist to Pentecostal to like all these different traditions and stuff, And so in some ways, like, that was really positive because we definitely got the sense that like there's not one correct way to do this was the message. But in other ways, by the same token that you get like the best of all of those traditions, you also get the worst of all of those traditions as well. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a cluster, but yeah, that was it was very much like an eclectic mix of fundamentalisms growing up. Yeah. Everything was church. Everything was our Christian friends and Christian family. And, but then in college, so I went to Moody Bible Institute, for my undergrad, and
is that affiliated with a particular tradition?
And not really.
Okay.
It's like people of all denominations go there.
Okay.
So like Moody Bible Institute is like very conservative, I mean, when I was there, women could wear pants. Mm-hmm. And we could watch movies in our dorms, but like that was relatively recent.
Okay.
Wow. But it's also in downtown Chicago.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, like, I was at this fundamentalist Bible college, but also I was in downtown Chicago. Yeah. And also, like, I went to church and did a lot of my ministry hours in Boys Town, which is like the gay neighborhood there. Yeah. And like all this stuff. So I was like being exposed to a lot of people that I never was exposed to before.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was just interesting that like this place that really tried hard to be, enclave is too nice of a word, a bunker. It was like a theological and ideological bunker. It was really trying hard to like wall us off from any other influence, is situated right in downtown Chicago. And so, yeah, I think moving to a bigger city and like meeting people with different life experiences was a really important part of like getting out of that bubble.
Yeah.
The bunker.
Yeah, totally. Was there a moment where when you started to kind of question the bunker? I feel like this is Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, but
yeah, no, really. I mean, that show is ridiculous, but there's some things about it that I'm like, I identify with this like a little too much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But no, like, not really. I get asked that question a lot because people find out where I come from and then they look at me and they're like, "What happened?" But like, it's not so much like one particular. I mean, there's lots of stories I can tell of like certain things that happen that caused me to question certain doctrines or whatever. But like ultimately it wasn't like one main thing or like one particular moment. It was just like a whole swath of like little moments.
Yeah.
You know? Just like little things slowly over time, like how you would just carve, like how the Colorado River carved out the Grand Canyon, you know? It's just like you don't notice it happening. And then one day there's just like this giant chasm where everything was before, and you're like, oh God, I guess I don't believe anything that I used to believe. But like you're not particularly sure how exactly that happened.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's kind of what it was for me. It was just like a long, slow process. And not really even that slow. I would say that whatever word you want to use for it, deconstructed is the terminology that's popular now. I did it very efficiently.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even all that long, but it wasn't the result of like some horrible personal tragedy happened and I started to question the idea of God as all powerful and omnipotent or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's more just like just paying attention.
Yeah. What was that time like? You said it was kind of compressed. What was happening around then?
I mean, it was like, you mean like what, that process?
That like deconstruction time.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think I kind of concerned everyone. I think I kind of concerned everyone.
Why is that?
I got really used to being looked at like I had just brought home like another rescue pet. You know what I'm saying? That look of like exhaustion and like concern.
Like showing up to like church events and just
I think
being
just
over
like
it,
in conversations with my friends. I remember one of my friends saying to me at one point, I've never heard anyone ask the questions that you're asking and not lose their faith.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, okay, like be that as it may, I have to keep asking these questions. Like I'm not, okay, if that's what happens, that's what happens. But like, shrug.
What were some of those questions for you?
I don't know. I think I started with like, here's our jargon, the theodicy thing. I think I started with the
theology of suffering.
Yeah,
why do people
basically
suffer?
like how can God be both all powerful and all knowing, etc. Right. So
Yeah.
I think I started with that. Then I did hell. Then I did all the sex stuff. then I like did the stragglers after that. But I think like it was interesting to me because I think that the way I saw a lot of my friends going through this process, hell was like one of the last things to go for them. Like they deconstructed all the other stuff and they were like still working on the hell thing. And I was just like, I feel like it's a lot more efficient to do the hell thing first because it takes the pressure off.
How so?
Like, if you are thinking that, like, it's possible that you might burn alive forever in a lake of fire for thinking the wrong thing, it's going to be really hard to deconstruct the other stuff. Like, how are you even supposed to ask that kind of a question with a gun to your head?
Yeah, once you get rid of that consequence, then you can start looking at everything else.
This is a thing that I've been talking about. I can't remember if this was in a personal conversation or this might have been on another podcast, but, like, it's really hard to do good moral reasoning with a gun to your head. And that's my feeling about hell. Like, so I was like, let me do that. And then, like, once you don't believe that you're going to burn forever in a lake of fire, then you're free to be like, maybe it's okay to not be straight. Yeah. You know, without worrying that you're going to die for that.
Yeah.
Which, like, sounds really dramatic, but, like, that's what they teach. So.
That sounds pretty logical to me.
Yeah, I think so.
It's pretty well thought out. Was this questioning coming toward the end of your college years or after? Or? So you're probably
like
you're in your early
end.
20s or
And so by the time that I was kind of like asking some of those questions, I was like kind of realizing a lot of stuff. What are we on swearing in the show?
Oh, we're fine.
Okay, I can say bullshit.
You could say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the time that I was like about to graduate Moody, I had kind of realized like a lot of it was bullshit, but I was like, I'm really close to being done.
Yeah.
And I want to get my degree.
Yeah.
So I finished the degree there. They gave me a piece of paper that says, that I am certified for Christian ministry.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think this is what they had in mind.
I think this still counts, though.
I think it counts. To me, it does. Yeah. And so that was kind of in my early 20s, and then, the next couple of years were sort of the process of the rest of that. But yeah.
So what? How does this deconstruction phase?
Yeah.
How does that align with your coming out?
So my coming out is like a very like weird story to tell because I really didn't. I think this is more of a personality thing than anything else, but it's difficult for me to do like emotionally abstract like reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
And so there wasn't, even in all the process of like deconstructing like beliefs about like sex and sexuality and purity culture and stuff, it was really more like for other people than it was for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of what had happened, I mean, I think one of the first things that happened was I did a lot of my ministry hours in Boys Town, and I knew like lots of queer folks from that, and I just did not feel about them the way that I was being told to feel about them.
Mm.
Like I didn't think they were going to hell, you know?
Yeah.
But like that's what I was being told to say, and like all this kind of stuff. And so that there was like some cognitive dissonance there to start, but even still there it was for other people, right? Like I was undergoing this like change because for the sake of other people.
Yeah.
And so all through, I mean, I would say I was raised very much in like the heyday of like the True Love Waits, I Kissed Dating Goodbye sort of hysteria of the late 90s and early 2000s.
Uh-huh. Well, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, that's
Joshua Harris.
Okay, and that's a book
that's
about purity culture.
About purity culture, and about, he was the one who was not just like sex before marriage is bad, but also like dating is bad, and you should only like do this like courtship thing where like you're basically betrothed as soon as you start dating, and like if you even like get a lustful thought, it means your relationship is sinful, and like all this stuff, you know what I'm saying, like this sort of thing. It was just so much. It took everything to like the absolute extreme. And Joshua Harris was like 19 or 20 or something when he wrote it, so like he didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but like all of these adults in Christianity were like, yes, let's listen to this kid, let's give his books to all of our teenagers, right?
Which all of that is a surprisingly, coming from a Catholic background,
Yeah.
That's like a surprisingly Catholic take, or even like more conservative than most Catholics I know. It's pretty intense.
It was hardcore. It was a whole separate thing. And so collectively, what we have started, and when I say we, I mean the people who are talking about this now in public, collectively we sort of refer to this as purity culture now, which is the religious corollary of rape culture, essentially. And so even through the whole deconstruction of purity culture, I think the thing is, in the way I was raised, and also in those books, in all of those books and all those workshops and all those, you know, things that the purity industrial complex of the time, it almost felt like it wasn't even like it was. My experience of it was that it wasn't even like it was explicitly homophobic. I think their thought was like, if we don't bring it up, it won't exist. So like if you look at all the purity culture books from that time, I have them all on my shelf at home. Almost never is same-sex attraction even considered. Sometimes there's like an appendix in the back of like, if you struggle with same-sex attraction, here's some conversion therapy books, right? But like it's almost like they were just like, let's not talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, it won't put the idea into their heads. Yeah. Right? Because that's the only reason people are gay, right? Is because they read a book.
That's it.
That's it. And so it was not a thing that I had ever considered for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had never like sat back and taken the time to like ask myself that question really with any sort of like gravity. And so I really thought that I was like a pretty straight person until I was like 25. And at that point, I had already gotten married to a man.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, and that whole time I really was just like, oh, I'm straight. Like, and even at that time, I had fully deconstructed my beliefs about sexuality at that time. So like, you know, I wasn't a virgin when I got married and like all this kind of stuff. And I was like fully affirming of all of my friends that were in like same sex relationships. And like, it was all for other people, you know? And I think it took me a while for a lot of reasons. I think one of it is because like I think it had to be okay for other people before it was okay for me, you know?
Yeah.
Like I think I had to make peace with that outside of myself.
Well, it's less consequential.
Yeah. than to be able to make peace with it inside of myself. I think some of it is because, like I said, I don't do like the abstract thing, and so I had never had any sort of experience that would tell me otherwise. I dated men all through high school and all through college and all this sort of thing. So like, there was that, and I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why, and some of it's personality and some of it's trauma, and you know, it's just I think we've all got a cocktail of reasons why we're in the closet, you know. And so, and I was in the closet to myself for a really long time. And so initially when I came out after being married for about a year.
Okay.
And initially when I came out as bisexual, because I was like, well, I'm married to a man, but also I'm attracted to women, so I'm bi. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because there's this very like false and like biphobic notion that bisexuality is like a stopping point on the way to either homosexuality or heterosexuality.
Yes, I've
right?
heard that.
And I don't think that's true, but I do think that stories like mine are more likely to happen in contexts where people are coming out of like religious trauma. And sort of things like this, because if I had come out as gay initially, first of all, I wouldn't have done that because I didn't think that at the time, but like say that I had, you know, that would have meant that everything about my life was over. You know, in a second. It's so consequential. And I think it's really hard. So I don't know. I think that happens more in contexts like mine than it does in like the general population. And I think it's like a thing that needs to be talked about, because I think people are my experience is that people are so rightly incensed at like the biphobia that happens in society that we're not really able to have the conversation about like, okay, but what if you did identify as bisexual and then you don't anymore? And so that was a really hard thing to parse out. And I identified as bisexual for, you know, almost probably 2.5 years after I came out. And I like, you talked about it on the internet, you know what I'm saying? Like I did like, do you know, Sue-Ann Shaw?
No.
I love Sue-Ann. She's so great. Sue-Ann and I did a workshop, on bisexuality at one of the Gay Christian Network conferences and like all this kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So this was like stuff I was just like working, because I'm sort of my tack has always been to sort of like learn by teaching. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't remember a whole lot of what you read or listen to, but you remember like a lot of what you teach. So my feeling is like I've always tried to like learn by teaching. That's maybe not the best thing. That's maybe too much, but
well, I was a teaching assistant this past semester, and one of my supervisors and kind of advisors throughout said, you know, it's very common, or that she would ask the question, what faith claims are you making through your teaching style? What actually comes out of your mouth, and is that affirming what you actually believe? Because how we teach and what we actually think sometimes can be two different things.
And so I think I was like working out my stuff, you know, by doing that. And eventually I came to the place where like through like over time, like as I went to therapy, as we went to therapy together, as like our life situation changed, I came to realize that I was not bisexual. I was just not really attracted to men in any meaningful way. And so I'm still, for me, like right now, I'm still trying on labels. I've thrown gay out there. I'm working on trying out lesbian maybe sometime soon. Like, I don't know that I have a real good label for it just yet.
Yeah.
And it feels like weird to not have like a thing to categorize yourself with that's like very certain, because I think that's like in like these coming out narratives, we're sort of encouraged to like pick something and use a category, and I'm like, I don't know, sometimes I don't know what I think about stuff until I hear it come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh wait, that doesn't sound right, or like maybe it does, you know. And so coming to realize I was gay was like a real problem because of being married to a man. And I was just like, shit, like my whole life is gonna have to change, you know, because like it's not fair for either of us to live like that, you know. And so I'm currently in the process of getting divorced. Okay. And that is really sad, but also it feels like the most correct decision that I could have possibly made, and I feel like 1,000 pounds lighter. Like it's really sad, but I'm also like 100% confident that it's the right thing to do. 'Cause like I really struggle with the Bible a lot, but like I take the words of Jesus super seriously when he said, "You'll know a tree by its fruit." And I'm like, the fruit of this decision has been like so much like lightness and happiness and freedom and liberation, and it's like it sucks, but it just is the right thing to do. And so but that's all very recent. That's all very fresh. That's happened in the last 6 months.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's a lot.
It's always a lot, but I mean, I think I remember feeling that lightness when I was coming out to myself. And I think it's painful to have. There are going to be parties who are hurt. Because they are used to you identifying a different way. But I do think it's doing them a favor that you're being honest with who you are.
And I can't not be. And that's the thing. I'm like, you know what? Like, I've been crucified plenty of times. Do it again. I don't care. Like, I have to live my life. And I don't want to have to lie about it. So that's been recent, but I don't know. It's just, it's teaching me a lot about myself and about life and about sexuality and about, I'm in like a pressure cooker of learning and personal growth right now. And it's been really rich and hard, but really rich.
I think that's a really healthy way of looking at it, though, because again, there are these parallels between sexuality and faith, and that has been something I've been trying to be more open to with my own faith. It was kind of my Lenten practice. I was probably reading a little too much Richard Rohr, but he was talking about looking at your faith as order. You're born into a faith, or you begin your life in some faith, and there's order, and then you start asking questions, you start deconstructing, and there's disorder, and then eventually, as you start to kind of put the pieces back together, there's reorder, and it might be something entirely new. It might be another faith tradition. It might be something that you're calling yourself.
And that process forever and ever until you die.
Pretty much. I think that's my intention
so
over
exhausting.
Lent was
I'm so tired.
Yeah.
I just want to nap for 100 years.
My intention over Lent was to rest in the disorder, because I think it's so tempting to just be like, give me a label, put something on it. And I think what you're saying is kind of tracks the same way with this idea of just you're going to have some disorder. You're going to be constantly learning, and that's always going to kind of change how you understand something in the world, something about yourself.
That's what differentiates us from rocks.
Correct.
Is the ability to intake new information.
Correct.
And adjust your behavior accordingly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, but it's good to ask the questions and to start finding out more, I think. I don't think it's it can be a scary endeavor.
Yeah.
Like, you would be in a totally different place if you hadn't started asking questions.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for all of it. So.
Yeah. Circling back to purity culture a bit,
Yes.
that's something that you've been, I think, more vocal about lately.
Yeah.
With the hashtag IKDG stories and all of that. What are you trying to do in that space right now as far as helping people kind of climb out of purity culture?
My main work with regards to like faith and sexuality lately has been with the Church Too hashtag.
Yeah.
And I think that purity culture is a big part of that in a way that a lot of people don't really want to talk about. So I started that hashtag with my friend Hannah. And a lot of people who are very committed to purity culture have wanted to kind of glom onto the hashtag and like use it to promote their like kind of age-old Gnostic traditionalist view of sexuality. And it's been really unfortunate because I think that, you know, Church Too is obviously a spin-off of Me Too, the Me Too movement started by Tarana Burke and then popularized last fall or 2 falls ago. Wow, God, it's been so long.
It feels
on Twitter and all that.
though.
Yeah, it feels like it was just the other day, but it's a long time ago. But yeah, a couple falls ago, started to go viral on Twitter, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we started Church Too because like the thought was that sometimes these conversations like deserve a little bit of a separate space because there are things about them that are unique to church. Like, so for example, it's one thing for something bad to happen to you. But it's another thing for something bad to happen to you and then for everybody around you to tell you that God's fine with it, right? Is like another layer of trauma. Or another way of saying that is like, you don't see Harvey Weinstein justifying his actions with a chapter and verse from the Bible.
Yeah.
But you see lots of pastors doing that and lots of people doing that on behalf of pastors. And so it's another layer that needs to be added to the conversation, which
Absolutely.
is why we started it.
Yeah.
But the people that have kind of glommed onto it have wanted to make it just about women, right? Just about how men need to treat women better, which is true. That's not true. But they want to make it just about that, right? Or they want to say like, we need to do better at training churches about how to engage with law enforcement and have reporting policies. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's probably also true, but like, it's reactionary to only deal with it like that, right? If you only deal with it in terms of like men need to treat women better and churches need to report more efficiently, you're going to be only dealing with the situations as they arise. You're never going to stop the situations from arising in the first place. And that's kind of what I'm interested in doing is like that cultural change, right? The systemic level of like, okay, yes, we do need to be better about reporting and we do need to, you know, have these like practical things in place. But like ultimately, like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Like, why is there an epidemic? And like, we need to be honest about that. And here's the thing is that people don't want to be honest about the fact that it is because of purity culture. It is because of this like sex negative religious rape culture that says that like female and non-binary bodies are dangerous and are subservient to men's, that sexuality is scary and bad and you should never do it. And if you do have anything sexual happen, you should feel extreme shame and like all this stuff. And it's like this shame-based sexual culture upholds sex abuse and sexualized violence. You know, that you can't have the epidemic that we have right now without that.
Yeah.
And so it's just, that's been my main thing, is just waking up every morning and shouting into the void that purity culture has everything to do with church too. And if you're not interested in deconstructing purity culture, you are putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Yeah.
And literally I just say that every day and nobody listens. It's fine. But it is my job and I will do it.
No, I mean, that's it's fascinating because I hadn't heard it put that way before, but that's the same conversation. Those are the same dynamics that I'm noticing in the Catholic Church right now with the priest sex abuse scandal. And there's, it's totally been reactionary for the most part. And there isn't this proactive kind of admission of what's in the culture. And I think in the Catholic Church, you've got some of that kind of purity culture in a way, like maybe purity culture light, maybe not quite as heavy-handed. But
my ex-husband is Catholic, so
okay, so you
definitely talked about that and like his experience with that growing up.
Okay, yeah. So you understand. So and then on top of that, you've also got the fact that we don't allow women clergy in the Catholic Church, and that
Well, and the Catholic Church scandal has been the Protestants' favorite thing for years, because even though we all knew it was happening in Protestant churches too, they were able to like point the finger and be like, see, it's those godless Catholics. It's because they only believe in salvation by works. That's why, because they're heretics and they believe in the Pope and they worship Mary. And that's what happens when you don't have doctrinal purity, blah, 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 right? And it's just like, now, y'all, it's coming out that you have as bad, if not worse, of a problem. Yeah. And honestly, it might be worse.
Well, I think you said it best a few moments ago, but it comes back to this shaming culture, regardless of the politics that your church may have or my church may have. But when we just cloud shame around any expression of sexuality.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you think about it, I mean, just it's hard for me. And I don't think that I'm like a particularly I don't think that I'm like hyper intelligent or anything, you know what I'm saying? But it's really hard for me to look at the situation and not see that if you have a big group of young people, particularly young women, but a big group of young people who have extreme shame about sexuality, who have little to no sex ed, because sex education is really frowned upon in these communities. Let's not talk about the entire lack of sex education that I got. I didn't know my own body parts till I was in college. If you have a group of young people, particularly young women, who have extreme shame about all expressions of sexuality, who have little to no sex ed, and are very a part of this culture that, this is unrelated to sex, but are very a part of this culture that kind of worships pastors and leaders, this sort of like fundamentalist celebrity culture where people are sort of propped up. Women are told that they are to be submissive to men, especially pastors, especially husbands. They're told that they are basically the gatekeeper of male sexuality because men have this like ravenous sex drive and they have to stop them and blah, 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 right? If this is you have a big group of people who are all carrying this, is this not like a flashing vacancy sign to predators? Saying, here is where you can get a bunch of victims, and we probably won't even report you to the police.
Right.
No wonder that's all happening in churches. You might as well put up a sign. Like,
yeah.
I think predators are attracted to these situations, to these communities, for that reason, because they know that that's where they can get lots of victims, and they probably won't get in trouble.
Yeah.
That's why, like, the background check thing is ridiculous to me. I mean, everybody should do it, but it's like, I can count on one hand the number of people I know who experienced sexualized violence in a church context, and that person who perpetrated it had a record.
Yeah.
They don't have records.
Yeah.
Because they don't get reported. They just get shuffled around from place to place, and that's how they keep praying. And so it's like that sort of thing. You know, it's like, so this took a whole turn towards that, but all I'm saying about that is that purity culture plays a huge part in this, right? And I will scream that until I'm blue in the face.
You've shared, I think, your own story online under the Church Too hashtag. Yeah. Has that elicited stories from other people? And are you creating space for people to kind of find ways to vocalize the abuse that they've experienced? Is that
I think
coming
so.
out of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Like, that's the whole reason it's called Me Too. You know, it's because you say a thing, and then somebody else is like, Me Too. And so, of course, we called it Church Too, just because you know, that was we figured people would understand what it meant, and it was not a lot of characters and that sort of thing. But
it's succinct, yeah.
But yeah, but like that's kind of it's that Me Too moment, you know, of like this thing of like, oh my God, that happened to me, and that's why we even first started doing it, because when I say we like created the hashtag, I mean we accidentally created the hashtag. We did not do it on purpose. I had no intention of like launching a thing when I told my story on Twitter. It was like, there's been other things that have happened since then around this where people had like websites and thunderclap campaigns and all this stuff, and I had nothing. I was like absolutely not planning on doing a thing, but I just was like angry and had been sitting on, you know, my story, which anybody who is interested can listen to any other podcast I've ever been on, or go on read any of the articles, or go on my Twitter.
Yeah, it was on your Twitter page.
Yeah, it's on my Twitter.
Yeah, we'll link that in the show notes.
Essentially, I was kind of groomed for a romantic relationship by an older youth leader in my non-denominational evangelical megachurch, and I had just been sitting on that story for, you know, like 10 years, and so I finally just came out and told it, and immediately I started getting responses back of like, oh, something like this happened to me too, like, and then one of his other victims came forward and was like, yes, this happened to me by the same guy, and like all this kind of stuff, right? And so this in the couple of hours after I tweeted this groundswell started to happen, and that's when Hannah and I were talking about, and she was like, I think that people like clearly want to have this conversation, so like we should facilitate that in some way.
Perfect. Yeah.
Because it's happening currently.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should make it you know, succinct, and so that's when we came up with the hashtag and tweeted it out. And so definitely it's been way organic and way grassroots. It has not. I don't. You know, I'm trying to get a website out there, and I'm trying to write a book in the next year.
Awesome.
I have a proposal out there. Hello, any book agents listening to this, but so I'm trying to make it a little bit more official, but so far it's been very grassroots, and so I think a lot of people have found community in this, but it's all been very like ad hoc, sort of, a little bit, just
Sure.
like on the internet, on the hashtag, and people making connections, and some have gotten connected with journalists, and, you know, gotten their story out there further and that sort of thing. And there's been a lot of really good journalism around it too. A lot of really shitty journalism, but a lot of really good journalism about it too. And like personally, I've made a lot of friends, you know, on the hashtag, and met people that I wouldn't have met otherwise, and, you know, that sort of thing. And so yeah, I think, and that's the thing too, is like a lot of times there's not a lot of legal recourse that can happen for a lot of these things. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's still the opportunity for legal recourse, but a lot of times there's not. And so I think what a lot of people, myself included, are searching for is like a more expansive definition of what constitutes justice in these situations, right? Because like I'm not even 100% sure anything illegal happened in my story. Maybe. I don't know enough about like the definition of certain legalese terms, but like even if it did, like I don't think I'd have any way to like bring like legal action against the person who took advantage of me. But like, do you know what happens when you Google his name?
Do your tweets show up?
Some of them do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, what's justice?
Yeah.
You know, and I think every person who has experienced sexualized violence gets to determine that for themselves.
Yeah.
Because for some people it is going through the whole legal rigmarole, you know, and for other people it's not. And so, yeah.
I think that's the question at the heart of the Me Too movement too.
Yeah.
It's what I keep kind of coming back to is like, how much of this dirty laundry, whatever, do we need to air publicly, and how much of it needs to, you know, how much of it is public justice, and how much of it is individual forgiveness, possibly reconciliation, but just...
And I think that's why it's like it's so important for every person to be able to like determine that for themselves, because I've talked to some people who have zero interest in talking about their story publicly.
Yeah.
Because for them that would just reopen old wounds. That would feel to them like airing dirty laundry. For them, that's not okay. But for other people, that is the most healing thing in the world that they can possibly do. For me, it was.
Sounds like it.
So yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like it's so it's so individual. A while back I listened to, this is like a complete sidebar, but a while back I listened to this really interesting bit on NPR where they were talking about like why the Me Too movement took off in the age of Trump. Because we all feel so powerless to deal with the fact that there's a sexual abuser in the White House, that we're dealing with the sexual abusers in our lives, and we're dealing with it loudly and publicly. And I was like, psychologically, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
I'm sure there's lots of other reasons why it took off, but I kind of agree, you know? And so, yeah, that's another aspect of the question of what does it mean to have justice in these situations.
Yeah. There's so many elements. You've got the politics of today. You've got the growth of social media in just the past decade.
We have the ability to do that for the first time. This is the first time we've ever been able to.
Yeah, and then throw in the sexual revolution, and it's a perfect storm. Yeah. What about sharing your story online has been healing for you?
Oh man, I think that I really gaslit myself about it for a lot of years. Because I have a story that is, by some accounts, what Roxane Gay would call, like, not that bad. You know what I'm saying? Where we kind of downplay what happened to us because it wasn't as bad as somebody else. You know what I'm saying? So, like, in my case, I was, like, groomed for this romantic relationship. Like, the sexual manipulation was primarily verbal.
Yeah. Because you said it was an exchange.
Yeah.
Via email.
Yeah, we had we would like talk online for hours every day and like all this kind of stuff, but like and then see each other at church. And it's kind of like, you know how you can boil a frog if you just turn the water up 1 degree at a time, right? Like that's the basic concept behind grooming. So like 1 second everything's fine, and then like before you know, you're like alone in the backseat of a car together when you really shouldn't be, and like all this kind of stuff, this sort of thing where it's like over time you slowly turn the heat up, and that's how grooming works, that's how abuse works, and so that's what was happening to me, and then it was all found out before he could assault me.
Okay.
And so I really, and he did go on to later do that to other people. He turned out to be like a serial predator. I know of, at this point, at least 4 or 5 other women. And who knows how many else? I don't know. Yeah. But because of that, I really gaslit myself about it for a long time, being like, okay, well, I didn't get raped, so it wasn't that bad. So it must be
survivor's guilt.
And like, so why do I have all these like trauma reactions? Like why, all this kind of stuff. And I think that definitely my situation did for sure suffer from the thing where like the bad thing happens and then your community makes it worse. Like I was grounded and punished because my parents didn't understand that like a 16-year-old can't consent to a romantic relationship with a man in his 30s who is like her spiritual advisor. Yeah. Like that sort of thing. So there was definitely like that added trauma to it, the family trauma, the religious trauma, on top of like the actual like the sexual awakening occurring in the context of an abusive relationship, know. And so there was all of that, but because it wasn't this horror story that you read about, I just was like, okay, well, whatever. Like I don't need to talk about it. It's not that bad. And it was amazing to me. I had just kind of like excused it for a long time. I excused my parents' behavior about it. And when I came out and like told the story, people reacted like with horror. People reacted like it was really bad. And I was like, oh, like it is really bad. Like having that outside perspective to bounce back at me and go, oh, like you didn't make this up. This was really bad. That was totally uncalled for and totally out of line. And you don't have to like downplay it. Like it was really bad and you're still carrying trauma from it. And it's okay to still carry trauma from it because it was bad, So to me, that's been like, that was hard at first. But like at this point, having been talking about it for like 1.5 years now, it's like, it's become a really healing thing to be able to do. And also I just think that was a really shitty thing that happened to me. And I sat on it for 10 years. And then I told my story, and it empowered thousands of other people to tell their story.
That's beautiful.
Like, it changed things for real. And that is, like, the most amazing and also really freaking humbling thing that I can imagine. And it's made me a lot braver. I would say I've gotten braver in the last year and a half because I see what happens.
Yeah.
So I'm, like, significantly less afraid. So I'm going to, like...
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
And the power of just owning your truth and telling other people. And yeah, and kind of that bravery almost begets more bravery. Like you just get stronger.
It's contagious.
Yeah. And then you share it with other people. Yeah, that's awesome. So you're also a poet and a writer and a yoga teacher.
Yes.
So what do those look like as far as like spiritual practices for you and continuing to find healing and I think the courage that it takes to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Yoga is a very spiritual practice for me. Yeah, I would say that's been really helpful, especially like I'm a person that like tends to want to like be a like ephemeral mist floating above my body and like leave it behind, you know what I'm saying? Like deliver me from this body of death. And so like yoga has really helped me to like be in my body and to like love my body and appreciate my body. And that is the most spiritual practice, you know, because it's like I think moving away from like Gnostic ideas of sexuality necessitates that we come to terms with the fact that like our brain is inside of our body.
And it's so, not like controlling, like it isn't the entire body.
No. The brain is just part of the body, and
right.
It's inside of the body. It's not separate from the body. And so, like, our bodies are what we have. This is it.
Yep.
So for me, unlearning purity culture has been that too. So it's been really helpful to have a practice that's embodied, to have a spiritual practice that's also an embodied practice. And so, yeah, for me, that keeps me really grounded. And so I take yoga, but I also teach yoga, which I really enjoy. And so, yeah, that has been a huge part of spiritual health. And I think that my relationship with church and Christianity is always very fraught. I also work at a church. So, LOL.
That. Do you still go to church on Sundays?
I'm Episcopalian, so like 60% of Sundays.
Okay.
You know.
Probably better than most.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I go to church and then I work at a different church. But spiritual practices in terms of like prayer and like scripture reading and all of that stuff is stuff that I'm like I really struggle with right now. But I have found that like yoga and meditation, that practice like it scratches the same itch.
Yeah.
You know?
I completely know. That's what it does for me too.
And for me, like movement is prayer. Like I feel like I'm praying when I'm going through those motions. You know, it feels it's liturgical.
Right.
When I'm teaching yoga, I'm doing a liturgy. I have it memorized in my head. I have my script. It's like it. I feel like I'm breaking bread at an altar when I'm teaching yoga. It feels like that's what I'm doing. I don't know if that's sacrilegious, but like
I don't think so.
But to me, it's very liturgical. It's very prayerful, and so that's kind of where I'm finding that right now. And I go to church for other reasons. I go to church for community. I go to church to spite people who don't think I'm. Sometimes I just show up to church out of spite. Like I'm still here.
You know, Sometimes those are the best. When I go to church and I don't want to be there,
Yeah.
those are the days where I get slapped over the head with like something, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I needed to be here.
Yeah, no.
So that's,
And I mean, like, I like
that's
my
fair.
priest, so, like, sometimes I go to church just to, like, hear Kira's sermon, you know? Like, it's
Yeah.
just one of those things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I go to church for other reasons. But my sustaining spiritual practice has really been kind of outside the four walls of church for a long time.
Yeah. It's interesting, kind of, as we're talking, you kind of have like this digital life, and then your like local physical life here in town. Like,
I know.
How does it talking about yoga as like liturgy, does it feel like in leading a yoga class that like you're getting that kind of like physical plant local leadership that you would in a church if that was what you wanted or what worked out for you?
I mean, I just feel like I'm always going to be in ministry in some way, and I
Yeah.
don't know what that is, but to me, I'm always going to be like adjacent to those spaces. And right now that's what it is, but it may be in the future I move back towards a more like organized religious space for that sort of thing. I'm open to it.
Yeah.
I'm working out my issues, but yeah, no, and it's interesting that like divide, cuz like so I work at a church, but like I haven't like super duper advertised that. And on Instagram, you know how you can have like your close friends list?
Yes.
So I only do this on my close friends list, which is like 20 or 30 people. But I have this hashtag called Secret Church Life. And I'll like put pictures on there from my job of me like feeding bulletins through the folder, through like the folding machine. Hashtag Secret Church Life. Because I think that, like, I don't know, it's just so wild to me. I have people in my inbox, like, every week telling me that, like, I'm not a Christian and I'm, like, a heathen and I'm leading people down to destruction and I'm, like, gone astray. And I'm like, yeah, this is my long con. This is my, like, ultimate plot is I'm going to, like, destroy the church from within by making the bulletins better.
By making the bulletins.
Like, what? You know, like it's so it's funny to me. But like also at my church, I at the church where I work, I don't. My priest of the church that I go follows me on Twitter, so we're friends. She knows who I am. But at my work, I like haven't talked to them about like my online life.
Do they know about your online?
I don't think so.
Oh, interesting.
No.
So it's like a double secret. Like,
It's like
you're
a
like a double
double
agent. Like some people
like,
on one side know about things and some people on the other side don't.
No.
That's hilarious.
Been fun. I just like my little boundaries. I'm like, I'm just going to sit here and make bulletins.
I love it. What's kind of next for you? What's on the horizon? What's on the edge of what you're working on at the moment?
Oof. I'm one of those people who just like enjoys constant like learning and stuff. And I feel really strongly about knowledge and education as a remedy for purity culture because purity culture basically can only thrive in ignorance. And so to that end, my other friend, not the same Hannah that I started Church 2 with, but our other friend Hannah, she and I have been writing a column for the sex ed website Scarlet Teen called Impurity Culture, which was like sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing that we just like started a Twitter account for because we were going to do like sex ed tweets.
Yeah.
But then the people at Scarlet Teen reached out to us and were like, hey, we have been looking for someone to do spiritually sensitive sex ed column. And so now we're writing for Scarlet Teen occasionally, but that is like has been like a sort of little like side thing. But I'm really interested in doing like more sex education because I think, for me it's a thing that I really care about, and I think my experience of purity culture was one of such ignorance and such like forced ignorance of where like you weren't allowed to have the knowledge, you know. And I want to do sex ed, but I want to do sex ed for like churches. Like I want to do sex ed for religious people and like Christian schools and colleges and that sort of thing. Yeah. I get bored if I preach to the choir too much. So I want to be in a space where I'm like challenging people.
You've got plenty of spaces around here
Yeah.
to work
Mm-hmm.
in.
So I'm going to be looking into that this year, actually, is possibly some certifications in a couple of different programs that I'm looking into. But
Cool.
but yeah, I care about that a lot, and I think it's a thing that I want to do. It's a thing that I want to do more of. If I ever write a second book after church too, it'll probably be a sex ed book.
Yeah.
For that reason. But yeah, that's kind of what is next for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all the incredible, inspiring work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And thanks for being on the show.
Thanks.
A big thanks to Emily for coming on the show today. You can find her on Instagram at emilyjoypoetry and at her website, emilyjoypoetry.com. You can find those linked in the show notes, as well as other resources like the Twitter story we discussed that helped launch the Church2 hashtag. Out Loud is recorded in Nashville, Tennessee, and is hosted and edited by me, Greg Thompson. This concludes our second season of the show, and we will be bringing more stories to you from Nashville in the near future. You can stay in touch with updates at outloudstories.com and on Facebook and Instagram by following Out Loud Stories or by joining our email list. And you can help support the show by contributing monthly to our Patreon page, which gets you access to exclusive, unedited episodes of the show. Those will continue to drop into the Patreon feed while the show is on hiatus. Don't worry one bit. Just visit patreon.com/outloudstories. And as always, please share the show with someone as a way to start a conversation. Thank you for listening. Go in peace.